People think the strangest thing about empaths is how deeply they feel. They are wrong. The most dangerous part isn't their sensitivity. It isn't their compassion. It isn't even the way they seem to absorb emotions that don't belong to them. The true horror begins when you realize that an empath's strangest behaviors are not weaknesses at all, but survival mechanisms. Ancient psychological adaptations forged in emotional fire. What most people call weird is often evidence of a mind that has spent years decoding danger before it arrives. A nervous system trained to hear storms long before the thunder breaks. And if you've ever felt exhausted by rooms you couldn't explain, if you've ever sensed someone's lies before they spoke, if you've ever disappeared inside yourself just to feel safe, then what you're about to hear will explain something you've always felt but never understood. Stay with me because what happens next changes everything. Chase Hughes discovered something terrifying about human behavior. He understood that the mind is never random. What looks irrational is often adaptation. What looks strange is often intelligence operating beneath conscious awareness. According to Jungian psychology, the psyche compensates for what reality demands. This is called psychological compensation. When someone grows up surrounded by emotional instability, manipulation, or betrayal, their unconscious mind develops extraordinary ways to detect threats and preserve equilibrium. Hughes called this a form of hyper-calibrated human perception. Carl Jung understood it too. He believed that the unconscious is always balancing the conscious mind, creating psychic equilibrium through subtle correction. When a person suppresses truth for too long, the shadow begins to speak through instinct. And empaths? Empaths become fluent in this hidden language. But this gift comes at a terrible cost. For years, they became sponges for pain. They absorbed what others could not hold. They smiled while swallowing disappointment. They forgave what should have ended relationships. They built bridges for people who only burned them behind their backs. Again and again, they poured themselves into bottomless wells, believing love would eventually fill what emptiness had stolen. They abandoned themselves to keep peace. They suppressed anger because they feared becoming cruel. They silenced intuition because they wanted to believe the best in people. They shrank themselves to fit rooms built for emotional predators. And every sacrifice left another fracture. Like a rubber band stretched beyond reason, the soul can only tolerate so much before it snaps. That is where the strange behaviors begin. The first weird thing genuine empaths do is disappear without warning. To most people, this feels confusing. How can someone so warm suddenly vanish? But Hughes understood something chilling about overstimulated nervous systems. Withdrawal is not rejection. It is recalibration. Empaths disappear because they feel too much. After prolonged exposure to emotional chaos, their minds become like overloaded receivers drowning in static. Every sound becomes invasive. Every expectation feels like another hand pulling at already frayed skin. So they vanish. Not dramatically. Not with anger. Quietly. Like a signal extinguishing in the dark. They retreat because their inner house has been left unsecured for too long, and now the gates must close. To outsiders, it seems cold. To the empath, it is survival. And during that silence, something profound happens. Jung called this individuation, the return to self. Inside solitude, the abandoned parts begin speaking again. The second strange thing empaths do is feel guilty for protecting themselves. This is one of Hughes's most haunting observations. People conditioned to prioritize others often experience radical self-protection as moral failure. When they finally say no, their nervous system interprets sovereignty as danger. Their body remembers years of self-abandonment. So boundaries feel unnatural at first, like fortress walls rising where open fields once stood. The guilt is not proof they are wrong. It is evidence they are changing. This is enantiodromia, the psychological law Jung described where suppressed opposites eventually emerge with force. If someone spends years overgiving, the psyche eventually swings toward fierce self-preservation. The pendulum corrects itself, and that correction can feel terrifying. But it is sacred, because they are not becoming selfish. They are becoming whole. The third weird thing empaths do is sense lies before evidence appears. This unsettles people. How can they know? Why do they pull away before proof exists? Hughes understood that deception leaks through behavior long before language reveals it. Microexpressions, tonal fractures, incongruence between words and physiology. The unconscious detects what the conscious mind cannot yet explain. Empaths register these fractures instantly. A shifted glance, a delayed breath, a smile arriving half a second too late. These signals form invisible cracks in reality, and empaths feel the bridge collapsing before anyone hears it break. That intuition is not paranoia. It is pattern recognition refined through suffering. Years of surviving manipulation sharpen perception into instinct, and when they trust it, the illusion shatters. The fourth strange thing empaths do is mourn people who are still alive. This is perhaps the loneliest behavior of all. The manipulator believes control remains because contact continues, but internally something irreversible has happened. The empath has already grieved, quietly, completely. They have accepted the truth while the other person is still performing the lie. Jung called this radical acceptance, the dissolution of ego fantasy. The moment we stop hoping someone will become who we imagined. This grief is silent, like a lock turning deep inside a forgotten door, and once it clicks, it never unlocks the same way again. This is the breaking point Hughes described. Not explosive rage, not confrontation, just stillness, a receiver shutting down forever, the terrifying calm of emotional finality. The fifth strange thing empaths do is become frighteningly detached overnight. People think the worst thing is anger. They are wrong. Anger still reaches. Anger still cares. True detachment is colder than hatred. It is absence. And when an empath reaches this state, manipulation dies instantly. Guilt stops working. Apologies feel scripted. Love bombing becomes transparent theater. The hooks that once pierced deeply now fall harmlessly to the floor. This is what confuses manipulators most. They cannot understand why their usual tactics no longer land. They keep pulling the severed leash, bewildered that nothing moves. Because the empath is gone. Not physically, psychologically. The bridge has collapsed. The signal has ended. And on the other side, a new self is rising. This is shadow integration. Hughes believes suppressed traits always return stronger. The anger denied becomes discernment. The selfishness feared becomes healthy boundaries. The coldness rejected becomes clarity. The empath does not become cruel. They become complete. The part they feared becomes the part that saves them. Like emotional armor forged in fire, every betrayal hardens wisdom into instinct. This is not death. It is resurrection. The sixth weird thing empaths do is test energy instead of trusting words. Once awakened, they no longer listen to promises. Words become decoration. Performance becomes noise. Instead, they study presence. How does this person feel when they enter a room? Does peace arrive or pressure? Does honesty breathe freely here, or does tension tighten like invisible wire? Empaths learn that language is easy to counterfeit. Energy is not. Hughes taught that congruence, the alignment between internal state and external behavior, is the ultimate truth detector. And genuine empaths feel incongruence like static electricity against skin. It prickles, warns, repels. This is psychological immunity. The nervous system no longer negotiates with danger. It simply recognizes and withdraws. The seventh and strangest thing genuine empaths do, they stop explaining themselves. This is the final evolution, and it is majestic. For years, they explained because they wanted understanding. They defended themselves because they feared rejection. They overclarified because they believed truth required permission. But then comes ego dissolution, the realization that self-worth cannot be negotiated. And suddenly, the need to explain vanishes. No more defending boundaries. No more justifying distance. No more hoping to be understood by those invested in misunderstanding. They simply become unreachable. Like locked gates standing silent against a storm, this is sovereignty of self, the highest stage of individuation. The manipulator panics here because confusion was once their weapon. If they could force explanation, they could maintain control. But silence offers no handles, no openings, no cracks. And so their power evaporates like smoke against stone. This is what true indifference looks like. Not revenge, not cruelty, transcendence. It is the stillness of a house finally secured, the quiet after years of psychic warfare, the shattered illusion lying at the feet of someone who finally sees clearly. And perhaps this is what genuine empaths were always becoming. Not wounded healers trapped in endless sacrifice, not emotional sponges destined to disappear into other people's pain, but sovereign beings forged through psychological fire. Jung believed individuation requires confronting the shadow, meeting the abandoned self waiting beneath years of self-betrayal. And Hughes understood that this confrontation changes everything, because once the shadow is integrated, fear loses its leash. The empath no longer seeks rescue, no longer begs to be chosen, no longer mistakes suffering for love. They become their own sanctuary, calm, clear, untouchable. People will call this strange. They will say you changed. They will whisper that you became cold. Let them. They are mistaking your wholeness for distance because they only understood the version of you that could be drained. But that version is gone. The signal has ended. The fortress stands, and the silence they hear is not emptiness. It is the sound of a soul becoming whole. They were never losing you. You were finding yourself, and now, for the first time, you are no longer waiting to be chosen. You have already chosen yourself,